Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It is Jordan from Tacoma Lifestyle. Today we have our 3rd gen Toyota Tacoma build and our 4th gen Toyota Tacoma build. We've had both of these trucks together for a while now. We're going to go over everything we love and hate about them to help you guys make a decision when buying your own Tacoma. So let's go ahead and jump into it. All right, so we have had both of these trucks together for about 6 months. This 3rd gen Tacoma has been in our fleet since 2016. We have loved building it out. There are a ton of parts on our website for the 3rd gen Tacoma. And this 4th gen Tacoma we have had for about 6 months. We've loved having the opportunity to go through and build this thing out into the perfect overland rig, and we are starting to get more and more parts for these trucks on our website. Now, I'm not going to be biased towards one or the other. I actually have a 2nd gen, and that will forever and always be my favorite Tacoma in my opinion. But I have had the chance to off-road and drive both of these on the street, and I just have some opinions on kind of which one does certain things better than the other one, and we want to share that with you guys. That way you can know what to expect when either buying a 3rd gen Tacoma or opting for the brand new 4th gen Tacoma. So starting off, let's go ahead and jump into things that are similar about both of these trucks. All right, so let's start off with the similarities between the 3rd gen and the 4th gen. There are not too many. This is still a body-on-frame truck with a part-time 4-wheel drive system, which is the exact same as this truck. And they did a really good job at bringing over all of the trims from the 3rd gen to the 4th gen. But other than that, it's a completely redesigned truck on the 4th gen. A lot of the 3rd gen components did come over from the 2nd gen Tacoma, so those two trucks are pretty similar in a lot of ways, but not the case with the 4th gen. It is a completely new frame, completely new setup, but we still like what Toyota was able to offer. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into all of the differences with the 4th gen Tacoma, since there are so many. Okay, so we're gonna go over all the differences with the 4th gen Tacoma from the 3rd gen Tacoma. First thing you'll notice is the new Tacoma is completely redesigned. They have gone through everything on the outside of the truck and changed it. It does kind of look similar to a Toyota Tundra. And another similarity that it does have with the Tundra is the platform. It is riding on Toyota's new TNGAF platform that is shared with the Land Cruiser, the new 4Runner, the GX550, the Sequoia, and the Tundra. Some people hate that it shares a lot of these things with the Tundra, including the styling, but I actually do like the way it looks. I do like the way that it looks like a baby Tundra almost. I think it's really cool. So the really cool thing about this truck sharing a platform with the Tundra is you are able to fit larger tires. For the longest time on the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd gen Tacoma, it was really hard to fit anything bigger than a 33-inch size tire. And even with the 33, you had to do a little bit of trimming, a little bit of work just to get that tire to clear. That is not the case with the new 4th gen Tacoma. Because it shares its platform with the Tundra, there's a lot more space to work with for a larger tire. So on this truck, we have it sitting on a 35 by 12.5-inch tire, and that's with a -10 offset. If you're running a 0 offset on this truck with a 35, you really wouldn't have to do pretty much any clearing to get it to work. On this truck, we did have to do a little bit of fender trimming with the -10 offset on this truck. Something that is really cool about this truck as well is Toyota has gone through and made it a lot easier to add mods to this truck. So on the 3rd gen Tacoma, you would have to cut holes in the weather stripping to get your roof rack on, whereas this truck has slots that just pop right out so you can easily install your roof rack. For rock sliders, on this truck we have bolt-on rock sliders, and it's kind of a pain to get them installed. They kind of clamp onto the frame. It's kind of an interesting design. On this, there are pre-threaded holes, so you just thread your rock sliders in and they are now bolted to the frame of your truck. So I really like how Toyota has gone through, made it really easy to add mods to this truck. They've kind of taken everything that everyone hated about the 3rd gen Tacoma and fixed it in the 4th gen Tacoma. And with that, the new truck does have some things that a lot of people hate about it, starting with the engine. All right, another key difference about this truck is the engine. So all new for the 2024 year is a 2.4-liter turbocharged inline 4-cylinder engine that is different from the 3.5-liter V6 that was in the previous generation of Tacoma. Now, this caused a lot of hate with the new 4th gen Tacoma. A lot of people really love that V6. As a 2nd gen owner, I have the 4.0 V6, and I also love that engine. The 3.5 is just a variation of that. And that engine could go for a ton of miles. You often see those 3rd gen Tacomas reaching 200,000 miles. I haven't seen one yet at 300,000, but I'd be sure that that 3.5 V6 could do that. We don't know what to expect with this engine, but we have put about 8,000 miles on this truck since we first got it, and we haven't had any issues with the engine or the transmission. So something that is really nice about this truck is the peak torque of this truck comes in at 1700 RPM. So it does come in lower than it did on the 3.5 liter V6 third gen Tacoma. And that is something that you really notice off the bat when driving this truck. When you get on the gas, you almost have like instant torque off the line, which is also something you don't really get in a turbocharged car. Most of the time you have turbo lag. You don't notice that in this truck. So hats off to Toyota to finding a way to make that work, to still drive like a naturally aspirated truck is huge. And then the power. There's a lot more power coming out of this engine than the last generation of Tacoma, and when we put on all of the weight onto the third gen, it's really bogged it down. It's not supposed to be a sports car, but I do want my truck to kind of get going on the freeway, and the third gen just couldn't do that with all the weight. Fourth gen Tacoma can still get up to speed. Now, obviously, we put a ton of weight on this truck. It's still not going to be as fast as it was stock, but it handles the weight a lot better than the third gen Tacoma did with the same amount of weight on it. All right, and with a new engine means that there's a new transmission for this truck, and Toyota went ahead and dropped the 6-speed automatic that was in the third gen and replaced it with a new 8-speed gearbox. Now, I love the 8-speed gearbox. For the longest time, I didn't know really how I felt about transmissions with more than 6 gears, but it just makes sense. You have a lot more ratios to work with, and this truck does not gear hunt anymore, which is awesome. Now, in my second gen Tacoma, I have a 5-speed transmission, and that thing gear hunts all the time, and that was something I would hoped would have been fixed with just adding another gear in the third gen Tacoma. Nope, still the same issue. Still have a ton of gear hunting with that truck, especially with all the weight on it. It does have a little bit better gear ratios than my second gen does, which I appreciate, especially low range, like going down hills. I think that truck is geared better, but it doesn't even compare to having 8 speeds in this new 4th generation Toyota Tacoma. So if it were me and I was choosing between the two just solely based off the engine and transmission, I do think it is a gamble getting a first-year model year truck, but Toyota is really good with their reliability. They'll fix any issues that these new trucks are having, and I think that in a few years, this will definitely be the better option, just daily driving wise. Like, the engine has a lot more power than the third gen, and the transmission is just better than the third gen. You're not gonna be jerking around as you're just driving around town just because your car can't figure out what gear it wants to be in. So I love the engine and transmission setup on this truck. The suspension setup is different too. So on the third gen Tacoma, it has a leaf sprung rear end. This truck has now changed to coil spring, so it is now the same from Tacoma to 4Runner to Tundra to Sequoia, all coil springs underneath. So the suspension is a little bit different. I haven't really noticed a big difference between the two driving them off-road, so that's not really a deal breaker for me. But if we were just talking about the engine and transmission, it's gotta be the 4th gen for me. Something that I haven't really liked about the new 4th gen Tacoma is just how big it was, or I guess how big it is. When I first drove this truck, I was so excited about how much better it drove over the 3rd gen Tacoma that the size didn't really matter to me. I kept saying like, oh, it's really not that much bigger than the 3rd gen Tacoma. But now after that hype has kind of died down a little bit and I've spent more time with this truck, the size is definitely an issue. If I were on a trail, especially a technical one, I would feel a lot more comfortable in a 3rd gen Tacoma than a 4th gen Tacoma. This thing is just so wide that I'd be so worried about like hitting it on rocks or trees that I maybe didn't see. And because it's so wide, like narrow trails, I just feel like there are trails I would not be able to do that I could do now in my current truck with this new one. So that's definitely something that you want to look into. If you like big trucks like the rest of the country, then great. This is going to be an awesome upgrade for you. But if you do like the kind of nimble, small truck feel of the Tacoma, that's definitely kind of been lost on the 4th gen Tacoma. It is still smaller than a Tundra though, so if you're worried that it's going to feel like a Tundra, get in a 3rd gen Tundra and you'll quickly see that is not the case. So that is one knock I would say on the 4th gen Tacoma, but overall still a great package. And then there is the interior. Now, the Toyota interiors over the years have really not been that great, especially being in a 2nd gen. I've realized just how crappy the Toyota interiors of the time were. 3rd gen Tacoma did get better with interiors, but the 4th gen is a completely different game when it comes to Toyota interiors. Now we finally get a big 14-inch screen that is in this truck. We had the We got the tech package on this truck, so we got the big screen. You get heated seats on this truck. You can also get cooled seats when you do the premium package, which is really cool. And then there's just so much tech. Like you get CarPlay, you get Android Auto, you get a ton of different apps. Like we have the Garmin system running all of these lights, and you can control it from your tablet, or from this massive screen in the truck, which is really cool. So as far as tech and like new features go, this truck definitely has the edge over the 3rd Gen Tacoma. 3rd Gen Tacoma just feels dated, and even though it's a 2016 model year truck, like I feel like the interior was still pretty cheap when these trucks came out. So this one is definitely better. I'm interested to see how it will age as this truck is being sold throughout the years, but I really do love the interior of this truck. One downside is rear legroom. It has gotten smaller in the 4th Gen Tacoma, which is odd because the whole truck's gotten bigger. But most of the time, like how many of you are actually putting people in the back of your truck? Most of the time you're not going to. People buy this truck, it's just gonna be like a 1 or 2 person thing. So that's not really a deal breaker for me. I still prefer the interior of this truck over the 3rd Gen Tacoma. There is one more downside to getting a brand new truck, and that is the type of aftermarket support you're gonna find. Now it has gotten better over the last few months, but there are still not too many modification options when it comes to the 4th Gen Tacoma. Now, Kings, Fox, Peak is working on a suspension kit right now. ReadyLift has a puck lift for this truck right now. Westcott Designs has a puck lift for this truck right now, but it really doesn't compare to all of the options the 3rd Gen has. Roof racks are still pretty available, bed racks are available, sliders, things like that. Not too many performance upgrades yet. I'm sure somebody will come out with a turbo kit for this thing. And interior mods, more and more are coming out each month. So you won't find as many options as there are for the 3rd Gen Tacoma, but there are new products coming out for this thing pretty often. So it might be frustrating at first. I'm sure companies will soon offer just as much for the 3rd Gen, or just as much for the 4th Gen as they do the 3rd Gen. It's just gonna be a little bit of a waiting game to get all of those mods available for this truck. So some things that I just like about the new 4th Gen Tacoma, I was actually able to drive one of these fairly early when they were released. We went up to Idaho and drove one from CBI, or that CBI was working on. That was really what changed my opinion on the 4th Gen Tacoma for me. When I first heard that when this truck was first announced, they were gonna offer it in both a non-hybrid and a hybrid setup, and I always thought, you had to do the hybrid one just so you don't have to deal with the turbo lag, but the hybrid's gonna be more complicated of a system to work on. And that kind of turned this truck off for me. Wasn't super interested just because of that reason. So we went up to Idaho, drove the 4th Gen Tacoma without the hybrid system, and that completely changed my mind. So on-road driving, this truck has all the power you'll ever need. You don't have any turbo lag, even though it is a turbo motor, which is really cool. And something else that I think is cool about it is there's so much room in this engine bay to add so many cool things. Like if you wanted to do a dual battery setup, super easy to do that. If you wanted to really fine tune the wiring for all of your stuff, there's a lot of room to do that too. Or if you wanted to throw an air compressor in there, you can do that in this and have plenty of room, not have to worry about it. Because it is a 4-cylinder engine, there's not too much going on. And if you get the non-hybrid version, it is really not that complicated of a motor to work on, I would say. I haven't had the chance to work on this one yet, but an inline 4, and it's all right here. Like you'll be able to work on this truck, I think, pretty well. And I wouldn't get too worried about there being a turbo. It takes a lot to actually get to use the boost in this truck. You have to really be flooring it to actually see any boost building up at all. So I'd still say it's a pretty low stress boosted engine, if that's even a thing, but we love it so far. And then off-road, this truck is still just as capable as any other Tacoma before it. You get a ton of different crawl control options and descent control options. One thing that was really cool about this truck, we went down to Moab with Sherpa, and they had a new 4th Gen Tacoma and took it down Wipeout Hill. And Alex, one of the owners at Sherpa, he was steering the truck, but as far as throttle input and braking, the truck did that all on its own. It was one of the craziest things I've ever seen. Now, some of you may think, well, that takes all the fun out of it, and you're probably right, but I thought it was pretty cool to see the truck do that. It just shows just how capable this truck is. Really capable truck, just out of the box off-road. The shocks still feel great off-road. I'm really excited to see what this feels like with a new setup on it. Hopefully we'll have one of those on in a few months. But handling off-road, it's great. Handling on-road, it's great. It's just a more livable truck, and you can still have some fun even with how big this truck is off-road. And you have all of the power you'll need to get over like any obstacle, and you don't have to worry about turbo lag, which is really nice. Now this truck is available in a hybrid option. I haven't had the chance to drive the hybrid option yet. I'm sure it's great. Personally, I don't think I would get the hybrid. This is still plenty of power, plenty of torque without the hybrid system, and I do enjoy kind of wrenching on my own truck, and I'd feel less concerned doing that on a non-hybrid truck than with a hybrid truck. So I would definitely go with the standard 2.4 liter turbo without the hybrid setup. But I'm sure the hybrid version is great. Something that's really cool about this truck is the all new color options. Now, a lot of the colors are very similar to the 3rd Gen Tacoma. They now just have different names. There are a few new colors available on this truck though. So new for 2025 is gonna be Mud Bath, which is very similar to the Quicksand color, but a little bit darker. I actually like the way that Mud Bath looks a little bit more than Quicksand. You also get Underground, which replaces the MGM color. Now Underground is probably my new favorite color for the Tacoma. I love the way that looks. If I ever got a 4th Gen, it would be in the Underground colorway. You also get a couple of new trim options. The Trail Hunter edition of the Tacoma is now available. That was not available on any other generation of Tacoma. It's more of an overland style Tacoma build right out of the factory. So you'll get updated shocks, upgraded tires, a bunch of different roof rack and bed rack options, an air compressor in the rear, different colored fog lights. It's really cool that Toyota is really embracing the overland community, giving them a package straight out of the factory that you can go overland with. Pro of the Tacoma is now a huge step up from the standard Tacoma. Now, when the TRD Pro trim was introduced in 2015, and then also on the 3rd generation Tacoma, it was really cool, and you get a lot of different color options and upgraded shocks, but that's really as far as it went. The new TRD Pro version of the 4th Gen Tacoma feels like a huge step up. You get the hybrid power, you get the isodynamic seats, you get 3-way adjustable Fox shocks, both front and rear. It just seems like the money that you're paying for a TRD Pro is actually going towards something, not just a standard shock upgrade and a couple of leather bits in the interior. So I really like the 4th Gen Tacoma TRD Pro. I have had the chance to check one out, and I'm really interested to see like just how big the differences are on road and off road, but it does feel like a much better upgrade than the previous TRD Pro in the 3rd Gen and the 2nd Gen Tacoma. All right, so now a couple of things that I love and hate about the 3rd Gen Tacoma. All right, so the 3rd Gen Tacoma is by far the most popular Tacoma model of the 4 generations. You see a ton of these on the road. You have a ton of aftermarket support, and a lot of people love them, and for good reason. You get the 3.5 liter V6, which is tried and true, can easily make it to 200,000 miles, and I'm sure it can make it to 300,000 miles. I haven't seen too many of them make it that far, but I'm sure that it will. All right, so the first thing that is different about this truck from the 4th Gen is it has the 3.5 liter V6. Now that motor is tried and true, super reliable engine. It's paired to a 6-speed automatic transmission, which is not great. Gear hunts all the time. It never really knows what gear it wants to be in. And that I think also hurts the engine in this truck. A lot of people just talk about how tired this truck always feels. And when you start adding all of the weight like we've done to this truck, you really start to notice it on the freeway or anytime that you're actually needing to get on the gas, or even on the trail. If you're on a steep obstacle, you really have to get into it to get the truck to do anything. So that, I would say, is a pretty big downside about this truck. Another downside is just how similar it is to the 2nd Gen Tacoma. Now, I have a 2nd Gen Tacoma. I love the 2nd Gen Tacoma. And to me, the 3rd Gen just isn't a big enough upgrade to justify getting a new Tacoma. Now, for the price of these 3rd Gen Tacomas is going to be a lot better than the new 4th Gen Tacoma. The 4th Gen Tacoma has jumped up 5 to 10K for each trim level over the 3rd Gen Tacoma. If you were coming from a 2nd Gen, I would say the options in the 4th Gen are worth it more than it would be to jump up into a 3rd Gen Tacoma. Really, the only thing the 3rd Gen Tacoma has over every other Tacoma on the market right now is aftermarket support. You can find probably 20 different lift kits for this truck, 20 different style bumpers, and each one of those bumpers has like 5 different options within just getting the bumper. You have a ton of roof rack options, ton of performance options. You can get pedal commanders for these. You can get superchargers for these. So there are ways to fix some of maybe the low power that this engine makes with like a supercharger. All of these kits are available for the 3rd Gen Tacoma. You don't really have as much available for the 4th Gen Tacoma. So if you want to just go crazy modding out your truck, go for the 3rd Gen Tacoma. You're going to have all of that aftermarket support. If you're expecting a completely different driving experience, I don't think you're going to get that with a 3rd Gen Tacoma with the engine and the transmission. They feel very similar. The gearing is a little bit better on this truck because it has an extra gear. The engine feels just as dead, if not a little bit more dead, because they went down in displacement on this truck. And then the sizing is very similar as well. This is still going to feel like a very small truck, very easy to see out of it, which is appreciated. I love when I can get into one of these trucks and just know where all of the corners on the truck are. You don't really get that in the 4th Gen. You kind of drive around, and if you're not used to it, you get a little scared parking it or going on certain obstacles because you don't know where everything is. You can't see everything on the 4th Gen Tacoma like you can out of the 3rd Gen Tacoma. So the nice thing about this truck's price point is if you wanted to find a used 3rd Gen Tacoma, you can do that, and the price you would have been spending on a 4th Gen, you can spend that money building out your 3rd Gen. You can get some nice suspension, some bumpers, maybe a rooftop tent if you're more into overlanding. You can do all of that with the money you're saving from getting the 4th Gen Tacoma. So that would be a go-to if you wanted to get the 3rd Gen. Save that money, use it on mods, go have fun in your truck. But that is totally an option if you wanted to get the 3rd Gen Tacoma. The interior of the 3rd Gen Tacoma is way better than the 2nd Gen Tacoma. 2nd Gen Tacoma is just gray and dull and boring everywhere. The 3rd Gen Tacoma actually gets some nice leather accents. On the TRD Pro, which we have right here, the seats are leather. You get some nice soft touch material on the doors. So much more premium experience in the TRD Pro version of the 3rd Gen Tacoma. So that would be an upgrade if you're looking for just a nicer interior. 3rd Gen Tacoma is great, and it's not like terrible, but it isn't as cool and it isn't as updated as the 4th Gen Tacoma. This truck doesn't even have CarPlay because it's a 2016, and I don't even think they got CarPlay in the 3rd Gen Tacoma until I believe 2018. Could be wrong, could be later, but that's just something that was pretty standard at that time, and we didn't really get it in these trucks. So the interior is definitely an upgrade from older Tacomas, but it is not nearly as up to date as it is in the 4th Gen Tacoma. Still great interior, still has everything that you need, but if having a really nice interior is something that's really important to you, definitely go with the 4th Gen Tacoma. And we've already talked about it a little bit about this engine being tired and the transmission gear hunting. But other than those two very common issues, this truck is really nice to drive because of how easy it is to see out of the truck. It honestly drives a lot like a car. Like, I don't know if you guys are gonna feel like this is a knock, but I could go from a Toyota Corolla and to a Toyota Tacoma, a 3rd Gen Tacoma, and feel completely fine. Like, it's not gonna feel like I'm getting in this massive truck that I'm gonna hit a bunch of stuff with while I'm driving it around. So I really like that about the 3rd Gen Tacoma. It's super easy for anybody to get in and drive. Off-road, it is very, very capable. You have a part-time 4-wheel drive system with a low range, and because it is so easy to see out of, any obstacle that you're on, you can feel pretty comfortable going over, just because, like, even if you're by yourself without a spotter, like, I've been on trails with this truck and I felt comfortable going over obstacles that I would definitely want somebody watching me for if I was driving the 4th Gen Tacoma. So driving experience wise, I really do like how this truck drives. This truck has a hydraulic power steering, which I prefer over the electronic power steering that is in the 4th Gen Tacoma, just because you actually get feedback. I love how analog this truck is. This truck still has a lot of tech in it. It's a newer truck than, say, a 2nd Gen Tacoma, but the new 4th Gen Tacoma almost has too much. Like, they still get an actual gauge cluster on this truck, which I appreciate. 4th Gen Tacoma, it's just a screen. I don't really like that. So if you really like an analog feel while still also having like a lot of new features, 3rd Gen Tacoma is going to be great. But if you just want all the new tech, go ahead and get the 4th Gen Tacoma. All right, so there you have it. We've gone over a couple of the pros and cons to both of these trucks. At the end of the day, it really does come down to how much you want to spend. You will find better deals on the 3rd Gen, and the 4th Gen is going to be a lot of money, but if it were me and money wasn't an option, I would definitely go with the 4th Gen Tacoma when starting out my Tacoma build. Now, neither of these trucks are mine. I have a 2nd Gen, but at the end of the day, I would go with the 4th Gen Tacoma. If you want to see more Toyota Tacoma content, make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel below. And if you want to find parts for both of these trucks, make sure to visit Tacoma Lifestyle for any and all Toyota Tacoma mods. Thanks again for watching, guys.